Welcome to the deep dive. You sent us your sources, and, well, we're here to dig in and pull out the really interesting stuff for you.
Think of it as your quick guide to getting up to speed.
Exactly. And today, we've got a really fascinating mix.
We really do. First up, excerpts from The Silent Patient. It's a psychological thriller, lots of personal drama, big questions left unanswered.
And
then we have this other text, completely different. It lays out this massive theory about global control by some kind of hidden cult.
wow, okay, talk about contrast. So we're going from deep personal issues to, well, alleged global conspiracies.
Pretty much. So our job here is to kind of navigate both, pull out the key ideas, the main themes.
And maybe see if there are any, surprising links without getting totally lost in the weeds.
That's the plan. Right. Let's get started. Where should we begin?
Let's start with The Silent Patient.
Yeah.
The absolute core seems to be Alicia Berenson's silence, right?
Definitely. So after the incident with her husband, Gabriel, she survives, but then complete silence. Nothing. Police ask questions. She's charged with murder. Not a word. The text even mentions her lips, like pale and bloodless, fluttering, but no sound coming out.
That's incredibly striking. And it sets up the whole mystery.
Oh.
And then there's the painting, Alcestis.
Ah, yes. The narrator sees it. Alicia's self-portrait.
But the narrator can't read her expression at all. Describes it as a blank mask.
Which is really interesting compared to how others react, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. At the fairground, people are just throwing judgments around. Pure evil, cold-blooded bitch.
And this is before anything's actually proven. It really shows how we project onto things, how quick we are to judge based on, well, very little.
It really does. That ambiguity is key.
Absolutely. And the narrator's reaction, that inability to read her face, it sort of tells you about the narrator too, perhaps, setting up their perspective.
Good point. And we find out pretty quickly the narrator's interest isn't just, professional curiosity.
Right. They talk about their own past struggles, this psychic darkness, and how therapy helped them.
So there's this feeling of connection, like, that could have been me.
Sort of a there but for the grace of God vibe, yeah. Which explains why they're so drawn to Alicia's case.
And it's telling that the narrator mentions being strategically silent during their own therapy interview.
It is. It suggests they understand the power of silence, maybe even identify with Alicia on that level. It hints at this whole wounded healer idea.
Which makes you wonder about their objectivity, doesn't it? How much their own past is driving this.
Exactly. It's a central question, I think. How much is their own story shaping how they see Alicia's?
Okay, so the narrator gets this new job at the Grove, a therapeutic place.
But it doesn't sound straightforward. The consultant they spoke to before moving basically warned them off.
Whoa.
Said Professor Diomedes, the guy in charge, is unorthodox, and questioned if the place was even, financially sound.
Right, so maybe not the most stable environment. Red flags already.
Seems like it. These alternative therapy places can be a bit precarious,
And that first chat with Diomedes.
Yeah.
Quite something.
Yeah. The narrator just dives right in, asking about Alicia. Is she getting individual therapy? What about Indira Sharma?
And Diomedes' reaction.
He calls Alicia a silent siren. Says she basically crushed his own therapeutic ambition.
Ouch. Like a warning.
Very much like a warning. He suggests the narrator might just learn the same lesson in failure.
So Diomedes has already kind of given up on her.
It seems that way. He sees her as this really tough case, but the narrator's response is pure defiance, like, no, I can succeed.
Ambitious. Maybe a bit naive.
Could be. Diomedes doesn't really commit, just tells the narrator to go meet her and report back. Ambiguous.
Then there's that brief interaction with Yuri.
Right. He gives this sort of casual explanation for Alicia's silence. She'll talk when she's ready. Ready for the truth.
The truth. That sounds significant.
It does, given everything that happens. But then he does something odd.
What's that?
He suddenly asks the narrator if they're married. Completely out of the blue. Mentions his own past marriage, moving from Latvia.
Strange. Why ask that?
Who knows? Maybe just awkward small talk. Or maybe probing. It feels a bit off, somehow.
Okay, let's switch to the narrator's personal life. Kathy.
Ah, Kathy. Their relationship starts intensely, doesn't it? They meet in a bar.
And Kathy tells the story.
Yeah, she's really animated, loves telling it. The narrator's just kind of listening, taking it in. Kathy jokes about her life plans going wrong.
So she's quite open, maybe a bit self-deprecating.
Seems that way. But beneath the jokes, maybe some vulnerability. It also sets up this dynamic where she's the storyteller, the center of attention.
And the narrator feels its really strong physical pull towards her,
Yeah.
right? Like instantly.
Overwhelmingly, yeah. Which is interesting because Kathy calls herself insane, but the narrator sees her as the least crazy person they know. Like she's an anchor.
They see something in her they feel they lack. That lightness, maybe?
Possibly. That stability, that sanity. It connects back to their own psychic darkness, perhaps. A sort of desperate attraction.
She's American, too. The narrator seems drawn to her confidence, her exuberance. Calls it un-English.
Right. It's like they're idealizing her, putting her on a bit of a pedestal, which maybe explains why things move so fast. They go back to the narrator's flat.
And it's immediate intimacy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sets up this intense, maybe fragile foundation.
Okay, now let's get inside Alicia's head through her diary. That July 18th entry sounds important.
It really is. She writes about visiting Camden Market, feeling nostalgic, lots of sensory stuff, teenagers, music, then a sudden desire for Gabriel.
But it shifts.
Dramatically. She encounters a homeless man. His appearance, his smell, it hits her hard. Sadness, disgust, this unnamed fear.
That contrast is stark.
Yeah.
Youth and vibrancy versus decay and fear.
Yeah, and then comes this intrusive thought about her mother.
Her mother's craziness.
Right, and this specific memory surfaces her mother driving their car, a yellow Mini, straight at a wall.
Whoa, that's intense.
And it directly links to why Alicia now hates the color yellow. Connects a color to this terrifying near-death memory involving her mother's mental state.
So deep trauma bubbling up.
Clearly. And it shows how these things linger, how seemingly random things, like a color, can become triggers.
The same entry talks about Gabriel, too.
Yes, about how much she loves him, depends on him. Says he saved her, supported her painting when she was lost, using drugs.
So he's like her rock.
Very much so. Almost idolizes him, saying she accepts his flaws no matter what. It hints at maybe a bit of an unbalanced, codependent dynamic, perhaps.
Well, possibly. There's another entry about drugs.
Yeah, remembering the first time she smoked weed, university party, felt shy, did it to fit in, and she felt this amazing sense of well-being, which gives us another peek into her coping strategies, maybe her vulnerabilities, using substances to deal with anxiety.
Okay, so that's Alicia's inner world, but the narrator's world is starting to crumble too, right?
Absolutely. Kathy's late rehearsals start triggering the narrator's own anxieties. Big time.
Suspicions?
Yeah, spirals quickly into suspecting infidelity, lots of negative self-talk. It shows the narrator's own insecurity, their own fragile state.
It's almost mirroring Alicia's distress in a way.
It is. That fear of abandonment seems really strong, which
Yeah.
Ruth, the narrator's own therapist, picks up on later.
And then the suspicions are confirmed.
Devastatingly. The narrator finds emails. The image of Kathy just shatters. She's not this idealized figure anymore, but a frightened, messed up girl, a cheating liar.
Oof. The whole mythology of their relationship just collapses.
Completely leaves the narrator reeling. It's a huge turning point,
Yeah.
forces them to face a really painful reality.
So after this, the narrator talks to Ruth, their therapist.
Yes. And Ruth has this really interesting take. She suggests the narrator's sadness, that feeling of being unlovable, started way before Kathy.
In childhood.
Rooted in not feeling loved back then.
Exactly. And Ruth suggests that maybe unconsciously that's why they chose Kathy trying to work through that old pain, maybe.
Wow. That ties back to the psychic darkness they mentioned earlier. Makes sense.
It adds a crucial layer, suggesting the relationship was maybe doomed from the start, driven by these unresolved needs.
Meanwhile, back at the Grove.
Things are happening. Elif.
Right. Elif is very blunt about Alicia attacking her in the canteen. Just states, she tried to kill me.
Just like that.
Pretty much. Doesn't want to gossip, just points the narrator towards Jean-Felix for more info. It shows how volatile things are there, and Alicia's capacity for violence, even silent.
Then there are Max and Tanya.
Yeah, quick interactions, but revealing. Max says he likes Alicia, but it sounds totally fake.
And Tanya.
She seems really agitated, whispering urgently to the narrator to talk to Paul, Alicia's cousin, in Cambridge, mentions trying and failing to reach an aunt, Lydia Rose.
And she seems scared of Max.
Definitely. There's this undercurrent of fear and tension, like people know things but aren't saying, or maybe are being pressured not to.
While all this is going on, the narrator's kind of falling apart personally, checking Kathy's phone, laptop.
Yeah, obsessively looking for more proof of the affair. Feels like they're going mad. And then there's this mention of someone named Nicole visiting soon, adding more potential stress.
It highlights that parallel again, doesn't it? The narrator's own instability alongside Alicia's mystery.
Absolutely. It's becoming increasingly intertwined.
Then Jean-Felix, he talks about Alicia's art.
He does. He has his own ideas about beauty, which contrast with how the narrator sees her work all pain and self-harm.
And Jean-Felix confirms something important.
Yes. The suicide attempt after her father died calls her hugely messed up, vulnerable, adds more weight to her backstory, the impact of that loss.
Diomedes brings up that play again, Alcestis.
Right, linking it directly to Alicia's silence. He plays with ideas, maybe Alcestis was silent out of joy, but pushes the narrator to think deeper.
Beyond the obvious interpretations.
Exactly, to consider more complex emotions. It's like he's guiding the narrator and us to see the layers in Alicia's silence.
Then there's Rowena, with the art supplies.
Oh yeah, very dismissive. Hands over the materials for Alicia, but makes a point about budget cuts.
Another reminder of the Groves issues.
Yeah, the lack of resources, the potential impact on care.
The narrator tries talking to Alicia again.
Yeah.
About her gallery, Jean-Felix.
Yep. Still gets nothing back. Total silence.
But then Alicia paints something.
Something incredibly powerful. A painting of the grove, the hospital on fire, and the narrator is carrying her out down a fire escape.
Wow, that's not subtle.
Not at all. It's huge. A massive piece of nonverbal communication. How does Alicia see the narrator as a rescuer? Is the grove itself the danger? Or is it her own internal chaos? So much in one image.
After this, the narrator feels watched. On the street.
Yeah, this creepy, paranoid feeling, which is really interesting because it foreshadows what Alicia writes in her diary next.
Creates a link between them, like they're both under threat or sharing a similar psychological state.
Something like that. It's unsettling. And the next morning, the narrator arrives at the grove.
To screaming.
Yes, instant tension, sense of crisis, which leads right into Alicia's diary entry from August 14th.
And she writes about being watched, too.
Definitely. It's escalating for her. She sees a man across the pond at Parliament Hill, takes his photo, even shouts out Jean-Felix, like she suspects him.
Taking a photo is significant. Proof.
Or trying to get proof. Then she sees the same man outside her house later, her fears becoming very real, very specific.
She talks to her neighbor, Barbie.
Yeah, confides in her, shows her the photo. Barbie offers a more mundane explanation.
Like what?
Maybe he's casing the house. A burglar. Or, maybe worse, a potential rapist. Studying your house before making a move.
So a less psychological take. A real-world threat.
Right. It contrasts with how the narrator might be interpreting it. Shows different ways to understand what Alicia's going through.
Then we hear from Christian about his therapy with Alicia.
Sort of unofficial therapy done through Gabriel. He says Alicia resisted talking about her mother's suicide, insisted on this idea of a normal relationship with her dead father.
Denial.
Seems like it. And Christian is pretty dismissive about her behavior after her father's death, says it wasn't a real suicide attempt.
Does that show Christian's limitations? Maybe.
Not
fully grasping her trauma?
Quite possibly. It paints Alicia as deeply conflicted about her parents, and maybe Christian wasn't seeing the full picture?
The narrator then tries to see Alicia again. Yuri helps.
Yeah, Yuri hesitates at first and dares using the therapy room. But then he suggests the art room, tells him to be quick because of Stephanie.
So Yuri bends the rules a bit.
Seems like it. The narrator feels they might have misjudged him, that he's maybe more helpful, or maybe just dislikes the rules too. Adds to the sense that things at the Grove aren't quite by the book.
The narrator talks to Paul, the cousin, about Alicia feeling watched.
And Paul just brushes it off. She wasn't right in the head, he says.
Ouch. Just dismisses her experience because of her mental state.
Exactly. Which really contrasts with the narrator, who's starting to believe there's something real to her fear, even if it's psychological.
And then a massive breakthrough. Alicia speaks.
Not just speaks, makes this incredibly powerful statement. He killed me.
Referring to her father, not Gabriel.
Yes. And the narrator connects this immediately. Psychological wounds, repressed trauma, maybe the rage meant for her father got redirected onto Gabriel.
That reframes everything. A possible motive rooted in deep past trauma.
It's a huge moment of insight for the narrator. Suddenly, the violence against Gabriel might make a terrible kind of sense.
Then there's the cigarette incident.
Right. Alicia asks for one before a session, notes the narrator smells of smoke, too. They go outside.
And the narrator asks directly, does she wish Gabriel hadn't died?
And her answer, because what he did was worse.
Worse. Worse than being murdered.
That's the implication. It's incredibly intense, enigmatic, hints at something truly dark about Gabriel, or what happened right before his death.
And she rejects comfort.
Yeah, the narrator wants to comfort her, but she pulls away, doesn't want to be taken care of, wants agency maybe, then just walks back inside, leaves the narrator stunned.
Diomedes talks about therapist anxiety.
Yeah, shares a quote something like, "A trainee who isn't anxious will get sick." Normalizes the stress. They share a smoke on the fire escape.
Another shared moment of vulnerability, coping.
Exactly. Humanizes them both, shows the pressure they're under.
Then we jump to the end for Alicia in these excerpts.
Yeah, the narrator is with her by her bedside before she dies, holding her hand, noticing her scars.
And anticipating blame.
Imagining Diomedes and Christian blaming them for the outcome reflects the pressure, the judgment within that environment when things go wrong.
But the narrator doesn't accept the official story.
Not at all. In a confrontation with Diomedes and Stephanie, they flat out reject the suicide theory.
Why?
They accuse Christian of lying, and they bring up the diary, the entries about being watched.
Right. That contradicts suicide.
Exactly. The narrator is now convinced something else happened, challenging the narrative, setting up the final act of uncovering the truth.
And the very last bit, clearing her room.
Indira notes how few things Alicia had. Stephanie says, "Clear the bed," and the narrator, while helping, is clearly looking for something, still searching for answers, even after her death. Underlines Alicia's isolation and the narrator's obsession.
Wow, okay, that's a dense, dark journey in The Silent Patient.
It really is. Deeply psychological, focused on trauma, silence, and uncovering truth.
Right. Now, let's completely change gears. This second source, the global cult.
Yes, a total 180. We're going from the microscopic individual level to, well, a theory about everything.
So what's the core idea here, this cult?
According to this text, it's a hidden group operating through secret societies, and their main tool is controlling knowledge.
How so?
By keeping crucial information to themselves, creating this divide. World 1, the insiders who know, and World 2, that's the rest of us, is supposedly kept ignorant and manipulated.
So knowledge is power, quite literally here.
That's the argument, that this information gap allows a tiny elite to control the vast majority.
And there's a structure. A pyramid.
Yeah, the text describes this pyramid of control. At each level, power is imposed from above, and people below just acquiesce, go along with it.
Imposition acquiescence.
Right. And this continues all the way up until you get the will of a few super psychopaths at the top being imposed on everyone. The text says this cycle only breaks if people refuse to obey.
It emphasizes conformity then, and obedience.
Massively. The idea is that people are kind of complicit through their passivity.
The text mentions tech companies, Facebook, Google.
Yes, it argues they're not just companies, they're like countries with the power they wield over information. They shape our reality, essentially.
That taps into current anxieties about big tech, for sure.
It does, and it links into another point the text makes.
Which is?
That people who are pressured into complying with the agenda, they often end up actually believing the official story.
To justify their own actions?
Kind of, to feel okay about going along. And then they become really defensive of the system, attacking anyone who questions it. It's presented as this psychological defense mechanism.
So what kind of things does this text claim the cult orchestrates?
Big things. Major global events. It specifically mentions COVID and the climate hoax as examples.
Orchestrated how?
Allegedly through groups like the Club of Rome, the UN, the WHO, and prominent figures like Bill Gates are named. It's all part of a plan, apparently, sometimes called the Great Reset.
Okay, these are definitely familiar elements from certain conspiracy theories. We need to be clear, these are the claims in the text.
Absolutely. We're just outlining what the source material says. And the alleged goal of all this,
Yes.
centralizing all power, bringing in digital currencies, but with expiry dates, eroding individual thought. The text mentions a prediction, attributed to Ray Kurzweil, of people thinking in the cloud by 2030.
Wow, and the ultimate aim.
A single world state under their control. It's a narrative about a massive loss of individual freedom and national identity.
How do they supposedly achieve this? What methods?
The text lists a few, making big events seem random when they're not, infiltrating political parties, using that problem-reaction-solution technique.
Create a problem, gauge the reaction, offer the pre-planned solution.
Exactly. And using front people to sell narratives. Examples given include the war on terror, or even using accusations of anti-Semitism strategically.
Again, just reporting what the text alleges here. It claims these are calculated manipulations.
Right, and it argues this isn't new. It claims the cult has deep historical roots, tracing it back to groups like the Sabatian Frankists.
Which is a specific historical religious movement.
Yes, quite complex. The text uses this to imply a long lineage. It also points to specific events, 9/11, the Iraq War, manipulating the UK Labour Party, using figures like Trump as evidence of this ongoing scheme.
Okay. Then there's this concept of Wetiko.
Yeah, presented as a sort of mind virus, a distortion of consciousness that's parasitic, wants to control us.
And this is linked to the cult. And figures like Gates, Kurzweil.
Directly in the text, it's like Wetiko is the underlying spiritual or psychological sickness driving their actions.
It also mentions the Matrix, simulated reality.
It does. The idea that our reality is an illusion and the cult's aim is to keep us trapped in it, disconnected from any deeper awareness. A common trope in these kinds of theories.
So within this framework, how does it explain COVID?
It presents COVID as a total fabrication, a hoax. The text claims the virus doesn't exist, that PCR tests were misused to create fake cases, that deaths were manufactured.
And the vaccines.
Portrayed as harmful genetic manipulation. Lockdowns, masks, all tools for mind control and dehumanization, according to this source. It names specific figures like Drosten, Ferguson, Yaden as promoting this counter-narrative.
Okay. This is a very extreme counter-narrative to the established scientific and public health consensus. Again, we're relaying the source material's claims.
Precisely. It's important to stress that. The text also brings up something called common purpose.
What's that supposed to be?
A hidden network, allegedly influencing government and institutions from behind the scenes.
And other claims.
The text alleges the cult is waging war on men and women as distinct categories, pushing synthetic biology, and aiming for a global fascist dictatorship. Pretty extreme stuff.
It paints a very dark picture of the alleged agenda.
Extremely dark, seeking to reshape humanity itself. And finally, it even mentions archons.
Archons.
Yeah. Unseen entities, maybe non-human, that supposedly feed on negative human energy. Adds a sort of metaphysical layer to it all.
Right, and the text itself notes the massive difference between this grand conspiracy and the world of the silent patient.
It does. It acknowledges that huge gulf in scope and, well, reality, I suppose.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've gone deep into the silent patient, the psychology, the trauma, the narrator's own issues, Alicia's silence.
Following that investigation, the twists and turns, and then we jumped into this other text, this sprawling theory about a global cult controlling everything.
The aha moment, maybe, is just seeing them side by side. The intense focus on one person's inner world versus this claim of vast hidden forces controlling everyone's world.
It's quite a contrast, isn't it, how we try to make sense of things. One looks inward, finding answers in individual psychology and history. The other looks outward, positing these huge, unseen structures of control.
Both trying to explain power, control, the search for truth, but in such radically different ways. It's like they represent two extremes of trying to understand our place in the world.
That's a good way to put it. One is micro, the other is macro, almost cosmic. It really makes you think about the kinds of narratives we construct or are drawn to explain things we don't understand.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, listening. We've seen these two incredibly different perspectives, the deeply personal struggle versus the alleged grand conspiracy. What does placing them together suggest about, say, individual agency?
Yeah, are we mostly shaped by our own internal landscapes, our traumas, our relationships, like in Alicia's story?
Or are we more like puppets, perhaps, influenced by these massive hidden forces described in the second text? How much control do we really have?
It's a big question. What resonated more with you from these two sources? The psychological depth or the claims of systemic manipulation?
What questions are still swirling around for you after this deep dive? Something to think about.